Today we're going to be talking about shorts as proof of concept and a calling card, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on over to the panelists, and I'm going to have them go ahead and introduce themselves. Who wants to go first? Rachel? Hi, I'm Rachel Goldberg. Oh, no. Who are you? What do you do? Give me the whole spiel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Goldberg. I'm a writer-director. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
there we go. Okay. I'm a writer-director. I work in film and television and theater. Recently entered the world of TV and got to do an episode of American Horror Story on season, MAYANS this season, and have a few upcoming projects.
Hi, I'm James Kicklighter. I'm a writer-director as well. I started out making my own projects when I was 16. I started doing short films, documentaries, trying to tap 123 people in rural South Georgia. And I tell that to people just because I think it's important to recognize that it doesn't matter where you come from, that if you really want to tell stories and you find ways to do them, you can tell them, especially now in the modern era. And I've gone on to make my first feature film in India. I have a film called Angel of Anywhere that's screening here at 2:30. I hope you come see it. And I've got a couple of other projects that are in the works as well.
Woo! Well, I've got one.
Got one, that's right.
But I will do you. Hello, I'm Elias Cavell. I've been an actor for about 16, 17 years professionally, and I just started to turn my hand at directing. I have a short out here next Saturday that I directed, and I have also written, editing, directed, and in my own short that I'm editing at the moment, and I've done a couple of shorts. So my journey is very much trying to aspire to start the whole film-making process, and I suppose it's an interesting angle, being an actor, trying to turn your hand to creating some kind of a narrative rather than being less autonomous within that environment. So that's, I suppose, why, or my whole journey in a very, very short sentence.
The elevator pitch. All right, so I'm kind of curious in the audience here, how many of you have films screening here at Hollyshorts? Congratulations. Congratulations. Hopefully you've been supporting your fellow filmmakers this week. It's all about giving back and collaborating with each other. And hopefully you've been learning a lot from our incredible mix of panelists. So I'm going to start with you, Rachel, because you've had such an interesting career. And, it's really phenomenal to see what you've done with your short film filmmaking and your work with AFI, which created your short, which then went into a feature. So can you talk a little bit about your journey and specifically how you started in shorts and where that's taken you to now?
So it was a long hustle. It's been like 20 years. I'm old. But I started off in theater and ended up going to Cal Arts because they had a degree in directing for film and theater. My theater work was very visual. And I got there and they were like, yeah, so that whole theater thing, we don't really do that. It's just going to be film. And I was like, oh, that's not what I signed up for. But then I fell in love with film. And post-graduation was, just trying to survive, as we all do, like taking whatever odd little jobs I could. I made a very conscious decision to pay off student loans, so I worked 120 hours a week for 2 years to get out of debt, and then I was like, okay, now I'm just going to focus on me. And did a bunch of shorts. I did some independent television pilots. There were wonderful, strange circumstances that led to that. And then finally in 2010, I was like, I feel like I've spent a lot of time supporting other people's careers, and I want to support them. And I applied to AFI's Directing Workshop for Women. It took me 3 tries. I did not give up. I refused to take no for an answer, and I finally got in 2010, and that changed my life. Because that was the first time in my career where I felt like someone else was validating me, and it gave me the confidence to ask for money. It gave me the confidence to ask for a higher caliber crew and talent, things I had never done before. It was always $200, scrappy, just do what you can to get it done. And then that film we developed into a feature screenplay that was supported by, I swear by the fellowships and the festivals and programs. So we did a feature that was supported by Film Independent Screenwriting Lab, which I also applied to 100 million times. And Sundance Women in Film Financing Initiative, and we were quarterfinalists for the Academy's Nickel. And so that led to more work, which was great. And then I did a short film called Muted about media discrepancy when a child of color goes missing. And that film played at the American Black Film Festival, which, little known fact, they only take 5 films. They're all curated by HBO, and if you're selected, you get distribution on HBO. So that led to me selling the film to HBO, which was amazing. And then that film starred Chandra Wilson. It's like such a long, I'm going to spare you all the details. But Chandra is also a director, and so I asked her if I could shadow her on Grace, and she said yes. And so I got to shadow her on Grace, and then I kept applying to all the programs. So I did Sony's program, I did He for She, I did Fox, I did Ryan Murphy's program. And each one of those programs, each one of those films, like, vetted me for the next one. It was like, you just have to keep building and building and building and just refuse to take no for an answer. And then by the time I got into Ryan's program, I got to shadow on American Horror Story, which was amazing. And then I got to meet Ryan. And he was like, why do you think it hasn't happened for you? Because you've been doing this for 20 years. And I was like, honestly, like, this is a really tough industry for anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman or color, race, religion, it does not matter. It's tough. I was like, but I've hit milestones that some of my male counterparts have hit, and they've gotten financing for their features, and they've gotten episodes of TV. And sometimes I feel like it's because I'm a girl. And he was like, I'm going to change that, and he did. He gave me my first episode of TV. And then it was still a hustle. Like, I got HS, but it took a good year of hustling before I got my second episode. And now with that second episode, doors are starting to open. That's my long story.
Woo! Yeah.
That's incredible, and I think, the one thing you can learn from that is just the persistence. I mean, you applied and you applied and you applied, and you get a million no's, and it's that hustle, and it's 20 years. I mean, it's you got to be in it for the long haul. It's not for the week. All right, James, can you tell us a little bit about how your trajectory of your own journey?
Yeah, so I alluded to this a little bit earlier. I grew up in a town of 123 people in rural South Georgia, where people are farmers or teachers. That's your kind of job path. And I met a professor at a young writers conference who had gotten some funding to make a documentary about a Western character actor named Deb Taylor. And so I convinced my mom that it was great for me to help him do this thing. And so with about $50,000, we went to all these states. I'm like figuring out how to shoot, how to edit. We got to interview John Mellencamp, Dixie Carter from Designing Women, David Zucker, who directed the Naked Gun and Airplane movies. And through all this process, I'm working with agencies, firing off letters from my tiny town. They're beautifully well-written 5-paragraph epics that I'm sure no one actually read. But the 80% of the people that said no, 20% said yes. And we have film. It was a really shitty film. It was awful. Didn't know what we were doing, didn't know how to shoot, didn't know how to edit, didn't know about sound, but that process taught me a lot about how to put something together and how to work with people and how to write and how to speak. And through those processes, I said, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to work in film. And I went to college at Georgia Southern because my family didn't have much money, so we couldn't go to a fancy film school. I went on the Hope Scholarship, which is a scholarship for people in Georgia with a 3.5 GPA or higher. The state pays for your entire tuition if you maintain it. And I got a degree in public relations after I talked to my department chair about what would be helpful for me in pursuing my film goals. Got that PR degree because it taught me how to do things like this, how to pitch, how to package, how to present. And in the meantime, I'm making my own stuff by financing it with wedding videos and high school graduation videos, which are surprisingly lucrative for those of you that are kind of into trying to figure out a way to make money to finance your stuff. And then I turned that money around into buying my own equipment and starting to make my own stuff. And when I was 20, I made the connection that if I hired professional actors, if I became a signatory with the Screen Actors Guild, I could elevate my work in a way that a lot of my peers were not. And so the first short film I ever wrote was a film called The Car Wash. I wrote it for Dixie Carter, but she had just died. And doing this documentary for school, I met a woman named Edith Ivey who had just been in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And so I contacted her agent, and they read the script, and she called me back, and I'm fucking terrified because she just worked with David Fincher. I'm like, who am I? And she calls me and she said, I can't believe anyone under 50 wrote this material. I will do it immediately. And so she clears her schedule, and she became a great mentor of mine early on and appeared in 4 or 5 projects that I've done in my career. And from there, that started going to festivals. I went to the National Film Festival for Talented Youth in Seattle, which is the biggest festival for people in the world under 24. changed my life. I met my first mentor there that was the chairman of the CW network, who invited me to their upfronts in New York a week after I graduated from college, which was a wild experience, going to a small school in South Georgia and showing up in New York for Media Week. It was crazy, at the behest of the network executive. And from there, I started making more stuff. I made my first short film, followed after that using financing from people that believed in me. After that, went on to make my first feature film for a Bollywood producer, which we shot for 4 weeks in India, 2 weeks in Georgia. It was released theatrically in India. Then went on to work for Hillary Clinton, doing advertising in 2016, one of the 12 folks that did the Facebook videos that you might have seen, interviewing people like Miley Cyrus and Tim Kaine, Madeleine Albright, really wide swath of folks. And that brought me to where we are now, where I've been doing documentaries, shorts, advertising for Caesar's Palace and various entities ever since. And I've got 3 scripts that I'm in various stages of development on that I'm going to proceed with shortly. So all of that is to say that everything builds upon everything. There's not one thing that's not connected. There's not one thing that doesn't happen. I met this guy at a film festival in Savannah in 2013. I met her today, but we have a mutual friend that's an editor that we've both known for a while. And so it's a small world, and you really never know where things are going to end up. So the best thing that I can tell you about starting out is make a good impression, be a good person, and people will usually follow.
Hello. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't know about you, actually. We have been friends for quite a while, and there's some new information that came there. Nice. So, what was the question again? I'm so overwhelmingly interested by the two your story now.
So Elias, the reason that you're on this panel is you're taking a less traditional route. I mean, obviously Rachel and James, taking very specific routes. In your acting, you've been in World War Z, you've been in Scorpion, you've been acting professionally for so long, and now, why now? Like, why now have you decided to pick up the camera, become a director? I know you're editing right now your one short film, so tell me why you're moving to short film at this point in your career.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting genesis. I think the difference or the contrast of being, I suppose, taking on what seems like a creative entity within an industry or within the construct of what narrative is, but being on the other side of the camera. And what I found very interesting about, I suppose, my genesis is that as much as you may feel like you are creating, and this is from a polar opposite, from in front of the camera, there is, unless you are really involved in the fabric of telling a story, and this is just from my interpretation, you want to feel like the vessel. And that's what I gained, because in my years of being an actor, I would look at people who had that creative sense of license and who had the freedom to tell a story that really, really mattered to them. And it made them happy. And it also spoke truly to the authenticity of the narrative and what they were really trying to create. There's a real directness and clarity that I felt honestly missing. And this is no disrespect to the trade, because I've learned and I'm still in love with the trade of acting. But there is a compartmentalization that the creator can have, that the artist in front of the camera is a part of the time. So that's, I suppose, reason for the movement into trying to create narrative and be a filmmaker myself. But I've been wanting to do it for a long time. And I don't know, are there any actors here? Bingo, congratulations. And it's a great, fantastic thing being an actor, and I love it. And it's the microcosm that you create at best is a small world within the story that you are, and you're serving the story. There are different mediums of which you might have more application or yield more fruit from giving more. So there's no real but. I was just saying but at the end of it because I want to carry on speaking. So I started my I suppose arc or the journey into filmmaking. I've been stopping I wrote, been stopping, and then I just got it out one night. I had 3 glasses of wine, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I sat on my bathroom, I wrote on my computer, and I just carried on. I didn't let my fingers stop. And I wrote the first script that I'm currently editing. We were in production for 3 days. There was an extended day, as there always probably. I hear that wasn't an aberration. There was an extended day. When my last show as an actor, we started filming the last season of, and I had to shoot the short film within a window of time because we had a facial hair issue. I grew some facial hair because I was in front of the camera as well. I had to shave it off before. There's a long story in this, but ultimately it's not no sponsorship for Gillette. However, what I mean by that is that there was a finite degree of time by which you have to create. And I know that always is what is the case. Is that every time I talk to a filmmaker, you're like, we are constantly facing the peril, the obstacle, the challenge of time. But what I also hear, and I don't know about you two up here, but what I also hear is that the aspect of time means that you have something that is challenging you to get it done in time. And that's what, I suppose, in a long-winded way, I am constantly fighting that battle of getting something out, creating, because maybe the window's open, right? But when the window is saying, listen, time is shutting, you have a challenge, you have somebody who's saying, you gotta get that done, or it won't be done at all. And in a way, that sort of paper tiger of time helps you get stuff done. And that's what it did for me with Game Show Her, which is the short film that I'm editing at the moment. Grimshaw, which is playing next weekend, I think it's at 2 or 2:30. That was shot also within a very, very fine degree of time. We shot that over 3 days as well. I'm saying like to one of the producers can do stand up in the background.
That's great. All right, that's great, Elias. I want to move on to talking a little bit about proof of concept. And Rachel, I'm going to start with you. Your short film, Neighbors, okay, that eventually was developed into Transformation Awaits, which was a feature. Now, a lot of the people in the audience, may be looking to create their next short film as a proof of concept. So can you talk a little bit about the elements that were either in the script or in the short itself that you directed that stood out to the people who eventually, supported you to make that into a feature?
We haven't made it yet, but we haven't made it yet because the indie feature role takes forever, and I did not write a cheap feature script. Unfortunately, learn from my mistakes. Write something cheap. The short, I purposely created something that was self-contained, that could stand alone, and that film did well on the festival circuit. But as you all know, you guys are already like heads and tails above where I was because you're all playing here, and it's an Oscar-qualifying film festival, and it's amazing. So congrats to all of you. But it was like, 20 rejections before I finally got into a fest. And then it was like the steamroll, and then you get a lot of attention. And what was great was that when it would play, people would ask, like, what's next? And I'd be like, the feature version. And they'd be like, do you have the script? And I'd be like, it's coming. And I knew that would happen, but I just didn't have the time to write it. And I should say, the short was based, the original script, my friend Jonathan Cope Evans wrote it. And he was kind enough to collaborate with me when I shot it for AFI. And then we developed it together into the feature. And so we kept writing. We had met people who were interested in financing it, but we didn't have the script yet. And then we just wrote. And that's when we started doing the festivals, the Film Independent and Sundance. And we won some awards at Rhode Island, as it's an incredible festival. They have the screenwriting competition. So we got a lot of attention with the screenplay, which then opened doors to meet more financiers. But it's such a juggle, you get some of the money, and then while you're trying to get the rest, that money falls through because they lost money in another film, and now they don't want to do film anymore. So it's been a really long haul. But I also want to say, like James had mentioned, gratitude and networking and just kindness. I did a short film through Film Independence Project Involved called Rosita Lopez for President. And it starred Daniela Bobadilla. Oh, thanks. Wow. And whenever the film would play anywhere, any of my work, I always reach out to the reps and I thank them because they let their clients do this little baby film with me. And no one responds, but I do it as a courtesy. And Daniela's manager always responded. It was like, oh, wow, that's so great. And one day I was like, you know what, you are awesome. And I just want to take you to lunch and thank you in person for being so supportive. And when we met, he was like, I'm Persian. He's like, oh, I have a young client who's Persian. Her mother's Persian, and she's a producer, and you should meet her. And we met, and she loved the script. And so she has been helping us with that project as well. So it's like one thing leading to another, but it's a hustle. Like, I'm still trying to get that puppy made. And now I'm just leaving it to my producers. Like, you guys go raise the money. I can't anymore. Just let me know when we're greenlit, please. But yeah.
So, no, you mentioned that it's a contained story, and so do you think that obviously thinking about the producing side, I know you don't want to think about that, but do you think that kind of helped them gain that excitement because contained, usually can keep the budgets down a little bit?
If I had kept the feature contained. So the short is about a woman who's got agoraphobia. She can't leave her home to see her mom who's dying. She gets a new neighbor who's trans, who's in an abusive relationship, and they start this strange friendship together. And through that friendship, she's finally able to leave her home, and the trans woman is able to leave the abusive relationship. So it's essentially Act 1. In the feature, she's obsessed, the woman who's agoraphobic is obsessed with this transformational healer on TV. And when she comes out to save her friend, they think they've killed him. So they go on this cross-country adventure to meet her transformational healer in person. So you sort of think it was like Thelma and Louise on crack. But it's in the 80s. It's got lots of extras. It's got dance numbers. There's like magical realism because the transformational healer speaks to her. Like, it's not cheap. And I knew it wasn't cheap. But I was like, I'm going to write it anyway. Part of it was because I felt so trapped in the short. I was like, I don't want to be trapped anymore. But by not being trapped, I also now am trying really hard to raise some money. There's a lot of CGI, VFX, yeah. Truly it should be like a $5 million. Our lowest budget is like 1.2. Everyone's like, you have to make it for $750. I can't. I don't know how I possibly could. But we made the short for $8,000. Like, I did make a tiny short, but then I exploded it. Yes, it was not good. That's why I say learn from my mistakes.
And it's interesting that you brought up financing because James, I was actually going to ask you next. You've had a tremendous career in terms of one thing that I find interesting about James, and I want to share with everybody here. James does not have a manager or an agent, and he has done his entire career by himself. Financed 100%.
I would also like to, for the record, I'm not against it. I just have felt, I'll tell you something, and I'll talk about finance in a second, but I want to seg on that for a moment. I got advice years ago, and maybe I've taken it too close to heart, but I think this is true. I've met with a bunch of agents, I've met with a bunch of managers at some very good companies, but I haven't met the one that I think gets what I want to do with my career. And I had a writer named Gary Lennon, who's currently the EP showrunner of Power on Stars, years ago tell me two things. He said, one, when people ask you what you do, you need to be able to tell them in a sentence. So I tell stories about loss and identity. That's what I do. The second thing he said was, don't sign with a manager just because they want to sign you. Because if you have a bad marriage, you don't want to get a divorce. And so for me, that is something that I've really, really taken to heart. So if there's a manager or agent out there that's watching that wants to sit down and chat with me, I'd love to chat with you. But I want to make sure that I do that in a way that makes sense for the career that I want to have. So that said, how do I do financing? Well, it's very, very long. My husband's back there, and he's probably rolling his eyes a little bit because he knows how long and tedious it is to do financing. Each project is very different. Each project is packaged in different ways, and the way that the market has changed over the past decade has totally changed the way that you do financing. We're talking about everything from foreign pre-sales, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, to actor attachments, to figuring out what platform it makes sense on. So per what Rachel just said, if I have a script I've got to finance independently and I've got a kind of consortium of people that I'm working with, all based on relationships, networking, hustling, trying to find places to put pieces together. it's got to be a budget that makes sense. And if I'm going to spend $1 million to $2.5 to $3 million on a project, that's not a big budget for return of investment on a film. It's very hard to justify and quantify that in the independent filmmaking space because you have to know how you're going to make your money back. And so I have to be able to talk about tax credits. I have to say we're going to shoot this in Georgia or Ohio or California with the lottery. What's the credit going to be to help mitigate your cost? Who am I going to attach to this movie that's going to have some foreign pre-sale value in China or in Europe and various countries around the world that buy movies? Because if you're doing a small little $3 million film, that's usually not going to travel overseas in a way that makes a lot of sense. And so again, it's all about packaging and understanding who it's for. And so one of the things I've been focused on, since I am interested again in stories about loss and identity, that usually doesn't have huge visual effects driven pieces. They're very character driven, they're very concept driven, and so it's a matter of working with investors that believe in your work, finding producers that want to see that vision executed, and working with actors and having opportunities to speak with actors that believe that I can deliver the vision that I have. It's really those things in tandem, and financing is not a silver bullet. So if you're trying to do that, the honest best way to do it is to just go out and talk to your friends and say, who do you know that might be interested in film? And that again comes back to networking and knowing people and being a decent person. I hope that answers the question.
Definitely. And you know, and one of the things is that the reason I wanted James to talk about that is because we've been talking about all weekend how you really need to be fully comprehensive understanding of the industry as its entirety. And James, of course, he's a brilliant creative, but he can sit here and roll off the tax incentives in Georgia like it's the back of his hand, and that's important for you. And it really has become a calling card for you because when you sit down with the investors, they believe in you.
They understand, and that's the thing that people forget sometimes that this is the show business. It's great that you have the show, but if you can't do the business that goes with it, if you don't understand how budgets work, even what Elle was talking about earlier, there's always another day. Sometimes there's not. And so when you don't have that in your budget where you say, I have literally this much time and maybe a day of overrun, what is it that I have to do to get this done if I have finite resources, right? What do I have to cut? And so that's where you're marrying the creative and the business together, saying that, this is the 120-page script I wrote, but I only have time to shoot 100 of these pages. How do I blend the business and the creative together? And if you can convey that to an investor, or to a producer, or to an actor, they trust you because they know you have this broader understanding of how these things work.
Completely, and completely. And Elias, I want to turn it on over to you. Obviously, when you're in front of the screen, you're acting in Game of Thrones and you're acting in Scorpion. You know how important it is to have great actors in the story. So now, as you're venturing into becoming a filmmaker, the directing part of it, can you talk a little bit about your writing process and when you're thinking about the actors and putting them on the page? Like, how has your acting informed you in your writing as a filmmaker?
Sure. I'd love to. I don't know if it's on. I've got a lot.
Can you hear?
I'd love to. I'd love to talk, if I may, just trail a little bit further back to what you were discussing earlier about funding, financing, and how the overall gleam of when a production potentially hits a real bad roadblock. How the manifestation of that affects the individual going forward. Has anybody been in a production that's been shut down? Yeah.
One.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's three. I saw three people there. No, hands are going. So that's a really unfortunate situation, and it happens for a multitude of different reasons. But James knows this. A few friends and colleagues in the audience now who know this. After the last show that I was in, I was also producing and starring in the making feature after the show, and that film got shut down after 3 days of principal photography. And the reason why I bring it in, it's sort of a bit of inside baseball, because that film really doesn't have a future in terms of how the creatives, myself included, are looking at it. And one of the unfortunate things, but I promise there is a silver lining at the end of this story. One of the unfortunate things about that, to start off with, is that there are so many different variables that come with the potential hazard of having a shoot shut down. And a lot of them are out of your potential control. So one of the ultimately freeing things from that I've seen from being an actor, and I was also a producer on this production that got shut down, is that you really do not have control ultimately over everything, and that can really affect the singular cause, which is your narrative. And through whatever capacity it is as the actor or the director, that's the reason why you're there, not to have it provide sort of a contra to you have to know everything, because I think it's very, very important. And I'm at the beginning of that journey of realizing what financing means, how that really affects the way that you sell a narrative, you sell a project, you know, a piece of business or an IP that you have. However, when you're shooting, we were 3 days into principal photography, and something happened. But also there's the realization that, you know, our production hit sort of it was a diversity. There was a diversity incentive where, you know, you could employ people based on, you know, I think it was 1.25, then the budget went down to 850,000, I think it is, for how much, you know, the reduction. So there was an incentive there. We got shut down because of something else, but also they were looking at indemnity insurance, and the person who's the main financier is getting their money back. I suppose that's the rainbow to the end, is that, you know, sometimes you don't, sometimes you do, and in this outcome, they are getting their money back to a certain extent. I mean, 3 days of principal photography is a lot, even in an independent film.
But this isn't entirely uncommon, what he's talking about.
But this happens
something
quite
that
a
does
lot.
happen, and so but that comes back to what we were saying.
But it happens in independent film, and it happens in studio films as well. And I suppose what we're talking about is the independent nature. You know, a lot of us are burgeoning filmmakers, and this happens where you get, you know, you're forced with those financial issues.
And you have to understand the business of film. So I agree, that's a good.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I tailed that off. We were talking about the creative process to do with writing,
Yes.
and how that translates from an actor's perspective. Yeah, I think it's it's very, very important to know the purpose of why each character is there, because you involve yourself with the minutiae, and you come from a place of honesty from all the perspectives or all the voices in whatever you're creating. That's what I found very, very interesting. You know, I'm right at the start, like I said, but I think having that perspective really allows you or that's what I felt. I had a real honest voice from writing. And I know that James writes as well, Rachel, you wrote as well as directed, and that's sort of the whole vessel of the voice. And I think sort of coming at it from knowing why the character's speaking, in what way, what subtext means, what are we really talking about, to have that sort of homogenization is very important for me. I felt like it's been a very freeing process.
For guys, I want to get into, you have your short, you have your tangible product that's on the screen. And one of the things is that you have to start getting it out into the world. You have to start pitching. You have to start getting into a room, and you have to start saying, hey, this is my little baby, and I want it to be this big adult feature film. Can you talk about, Rich, I'm sorry for you again. Can you talk about what it was like when it was done, and once you started getting into rooms? What were the questions that you were asked by executives? What were they looking for? What did you start to see that you needed to be, armed with as you started on this journey?
Well, these are good questions. I haven't really gotten to pitch these features in rooms, honestly. It's more like settings like this, like meeting other people or people introducing new financiers, or meeting independent producers and just pitching like I sort of pitched to you guys, like this is what the story is about. I should say, like, going off of, what James was saying about the business of it, I know that when I say like $750,000, like that sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. Like, I'm very aware that it's a lot of money. But it's that idea of, like, I wrote an indie art house feature with a black trans lead. Like, nobody wants to invest in that because the return is so small. So it's either finding someone who doesn't mind about losing the money or just wants the tax write-off, or writing horror films, or like finding out like what's the thing now that's got a big return on its investment. But that's why I'm not pitching in rooms, because what it's done for me, it's been a sample to get me into rooms that shows that I'm a talented writer. So I got to meet with Jessica Chastain's company, and like in terms of managers, agents, all of that, that's also a long haul. I got my first agent maybe 2 years ago, and that was after winning, 20 awards, like doing 30 productions, doing a ton of programs before I finally got representation.
I have time.
You have time. But what it did for me, what the agent did for me, it does get me in those rooms. So I did get to meet with like Jessica's company, and that was amazing. They loved my sample. They're like, there's no way we're producing this film, but we like you as a writer, we like you as a director, and we have this property. Read this property and tell us your spin on it. And so I got to pitch Jessica Chastain directly. There's a small production company, Mar Vista, that's amazing. They do all these under $1 million films. They give women filmmakers their first features. They're an incredible company. And they read my sample and like, we would never make this movie, but we like you as a writer. Pitch on an Amish thriller. And I was like, pitch on an Amish thriller? So I did. And they hired me to write and direct the feature based on like a paragraph pitch because they liked my writing sample. So I haven't gotten to pitch that, but it has gotten me into rooms where I can talk about other things. I work primarily as a director. I bill myself as a director-writer. If you are a writer, everybody wants content. So when I go into rooms, they are asking like, what do you have? Everybody's hungry for content right now. I just don't have time to do it all. So I'm putting most of my energy into directing right now. But I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, actually, no. Are they asking you like specifically? Are they asking you what cameras you shoot on? Are they like things like that? Are there any of those types of things that are coming up in conversations?
So if I'm meeting indie producers, it's really like, what's the budget? What's the return on investment? Like, what's your plan for this? It's really business. I've met with financiers who don't even want to read the script. They want to know who's attached and like, what's the budget? And that's really all they want to know.
I just want to zip in real quick. It's shocking how many financiers and producers don't read your material. That's a fun, unknown fact that most people don't realize. People will not read your stuff, and that's fact.
It's true. It's true. But if I'm pitching on somebody else's project, like I got to pitch on a Disney project, I got to pitch on Kim Possible, which was awesome. But in that, you've got like 15 minutes, you go in, and you've got to show them your vision. Like, how do you see this? Who is the talent that you see? Why are you the right person for this project? Why now? What themes are you drawn to? And that's across the board. Like when you're trying to sell yourself, it's like, why you? Why now? Why are you drawn to it? How do you see it? And that's really important. But in terms of pitching my own stuff, it's too small for those rooms. So the question is really just like, how are we going to make our money back?
I'm trying to think of what I want to add. You covered a lot. No, as I said earlier, people don't necessarily read your stuff, and so it's really, I think, almost about a cult of personality that you have to create around yourself. I think that people invest in you, and when you're dealing with investors and you're dealing with creatives, actors obviously are going to read the script. There are people that will read the script, but managers, agents, oftentimes are not going to read it. They're going to know what the offer is, and then they're going to send it off if they think it's something reasonable. And financiers, they just need to see that you're competent and you have some sort of track record and they believe in you when you get there. Some of them will read your material, for sure. I'm not saying everyone doesn't. But you have to put it in perspective of how much material is out there. If you were given 50 scripts a day in a week, could you read them all? You couldn't. And so it really has nothing to do with you or your material. It has to do with time. And so if you can eliminate that idea out of your head immediately and say, this is my concept, this is what it's about, this is who I want in it, this is how much it's going to cost. If you can package that in a nice 5-10 minute conversation, you can get somebody on board. But they're not going to sit down and read your entire script. They won't do it.
I've been working on a documentary about the wildfires that have been happening for about a year and a half all across California, and furthermore throughout. And it's interesting when you get in a room or when you start talking to potential financiers about there's a huge onus that's placed on how much the project is going to cost, where they see the platform going, and how much a potential return on, or a potential, I suppose, equity that you place on sort of how their platform is viewed. By which I mean, say, Netflix, or if somebody else is financing the project or getting involved in financing, how the end equity in terms of like how to what degree of positivity that narrative has. So there is, it's such a weird thing, and I know it's different narrative making a documentary to, a controlled narrative, which actually doesn't mean that a documentary isn't controlled narrative at all.
But it's the same with finance.
But it's really interesting. You might be doing a story about what happened, but there still is a huge onus on how that money comes back.
Actually, in my brain, I was just thinking about how earlier in the panel, RB had brought up the why you, why now. I mean, that's just so important. And, you think of, again, you think of the business of the business, which, sometimes it's hard to think of as a filmmaker. Have you guys heard the term "kill your darlings" in the script? It's interesting. It's interesting because I'm sure people in the audience, you guys might agonize over certain frames as you're looking at it on the computer, and you're agonizing over whether you should keep that extra 30 seconds because you just love the way that shoe looks at the end of the frame. Can you guys talk about that and talk about sometimes having to make creative and business choices and play your darlings as opposed to business?
I think it's a good question.
Applies to across the board, really.
It does. I think it's a combo of knowing what you want and why it's important, but also knowing what you don't need, and it's a really fine line. So for me, it's the way that I sort of keep myself honest. There are people that I trust so much, and so if it's a script, I ask for their feedback and what they would cut and what they would change. If it's an edit, I ask for their feedback, and then if I'm hearing the same note over and over again, I'm like, yeah, it's gotta go. And if I'm only hearing it once and my gut is saying the opposite, then I stick to my gut. But you have to learn how to balance your gut with not. I had written an early screenplay, early on, that a production company was willing to finance, and at the end, a girl kills her father. And the financiers were like, no, the dad should commit suicide. That's not what it's about. Yeah. So, it was just a different story, and he would have given me all the money, and it was a great production company, and I would have gotten my first feature made at 25.
I've had this happen too.
Yeah.
Oscar said no.
Yeah, and I walked away, and I'm glad that I walked away. But you have to know, is this important to me or is this not? And that's what it ultimately comes down to.
Did you get it made?
No. Someday I will.
You stuck to your gut.
And you'll be in a better position.
Exactly.
And it's interesting you say that. The way I look at it is this. I think there's a difference between a feedback and an opinion. Those are two very different things, right? And if you see something over and over and over again, that's feedback. That's constructive criticism. And if it's misnomers where one person has this idea, one has this thought, that's somebody's opinion. And so you've got to learn to discern between those two things. The other thing about Killing Your Darlings, obviously, is it's not just about what you're doing in the script, it's also in the edit. It's amazing in independent film how little discipline people sometimes have about their work. Where you should have, a film that's a feature film that should, somebody thinks it needs to be 90 minutes because they need to hit this arbitrary number, where it actually should have been 75 or 80. In indie film, especially in the digital space that we live in now, numbers are very arbitrary. Tell the best story that you can, and if you're doing it in an independent space, you're probably not taking it out to theaters for mass distribution. It's for art houses and for digital. So kill the darlings. It doesn't matter if it's this beautiful shot that you compose, that's beautiful, that has this wonderful piece. A shot is not your movie. Your movie is the totality of this experience that you're creating. And if that shot is getting in the way of you telling a better film, if you spent 30 seconds on this beautifully composed thing, and that's 30 seconds that's wasted, that bores your audience, that's not serving your story and the final product that you're trying to make, cut it. Don't try to hit these arbitrary numbers. That's the thing that frustrates me all the time about these indie films, that, it's like, we have to have 90 minutes. You don't. You really don't. Tell the best story you can, edit it, because people are going to take you more seriously when you have a really condensed, compressed, well-told work, not something that makes someone wonder why you didn't edit more.
I was hoping you would go there, and I'm glad that you did. And and James, obviously, people are looking at your, all of the films that you've created. I mean, have any of the people that have given you opportunities for the next film and the next film ever said, "Wow, I really wish that you would have extended that scene"?
No. I've had people that say I should have cut it. But I've never had somebody tell me, "Oh, James, if you had just had this 2 more minutes, I would have just." Why? But I mean, that's the thing. If I go back and look at my stuff, even now, like, I'll go back every project. I think that we all have this tendency, right? Like, if you go back and look at something, you go, God, if I had only done this thing, right? Because you have knowledge now that you didn't have 5 years ago. You have knowledge now that you didn't have 6 months ago. And so if I go back and watch anything that I've ever worked on, there are things I think that are better than others, but I can watch things and say, if I had only had the discipline then to do this thing. And so I think for now, it's always about looking at your work and being disciplined, because people are never going to hope that your work is longer. They're only going to make sure that it's work that's disciplined and tells a good story.
And then, Elyes, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I wrote, I directed, and I was in a short that I'm still editing, that I shot 4 months before we shot the film that's screening now, or next Saturday. And it's really interesting sitting with projects, or I find it really interesting sitting with a project that I'm continuously, or that is sort of, I suppose in a way, like kombuchaizing in the brain. It's like, it was you get it, you put it in, but you probably won't, I know, but it's there. It's always there. But it's interesting having that idea ferment. It's interesting having that idea in your brain for something that you've already shot and letting it fester, because it was an inorganic process about me now thinking about how I'm going to edit the piece, because primarily I was in the project that I'm editing at the moment, and I chose to do that because I wanted specific performance, not because it was I would be the greatest, but because I knew exactly what I was creating. And now that it's taken on this huge arc, I've found that I'm looking at the content in a different way, and I don't know whether this is a constant journey, and I'm finding it really interesting as a creator, really looking at the positivity of whatever challenge I'm faced with. I think that is a real emblem of whether you get the doors start to close in on you, and you start to look at what you're presented with as being shit. I have to cut over here because the performance isn't as strong, or because there's a lot more breath, because I want some dynamism in terms of the cutting pattern of the piece, but I really wanted a slow burning, maybe a dolly shot, or I wanted something a bit slower, there's a little bit of a bump on the camera move. All of those little bits of minutia, for me, looking at it in terms of almost like a posthumous way, I found that the tone and what I'm trying to say is becoming much clearer, if that makes sense. And that really does have a much more powerful effect over the way that I'm editing that.
Excellent. I want to just bring it back a little bit here, and Rachel, I wanted to ask you, it's just so cool that you directed an episode of American Horror Story. I mean, come on, guys, give her a round of applause. You have to geek out about that. I mean, and you're an overnight success with 20 years, right? And for those of you guys who were here yesterday, I don't know if you remember Lauren Fauch, who was here. She was an overnight success of 10 years. So let me ask you, to people sitting in the audience, do you think that they could just walk in tomorrow and direct an episode of American Horror Story? And be honest.
I don't know who's in the audience. I mean, it was hard. It was amazing. It was wonderful. I think I personally would not be able to do it if I hadn't had all those years of experience. If I hadn't already honed my craft into like, what do I need? You know, the pace of TV is really, really fast. I feel like the indie world totally gets you ready for it. Like you're moving at a breakneck speed. For Mayans, for instance, my editor's cut was 75 minutes long. We shot that in 7.5 days. So it almost killed me. It was joyous, but it almost killed me. And had I not done AHS, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. And if I hadn't done all the work that I've done prior to get into AHS, I wouldn't have been able to handle AHS. So like it happened at the right time, and I'm glad that it happened when it did. Had I not shadowed on AHS the year before for a month, I would have never been able to. And when I got the job, I asked if I could come and shadow again, and they said yes. And I shadowed Brad Beaker, who's brilliant, he's a brilliant producer director. And I got to shadow Jen Lynch, when she directed, and she's brilliant. And they taught me so much, so much. If I had not had them, there's no way. And then with Mayans, I came and I shadowed Roberto Varga, who's amazing, who's the producing director. I'm like, you know, even with the shows coming up, it's like, I want to get to know the cast, I want to get to know the crew. I do my homework. But, so to your question, if there are people who've been directing as long as I have, yes, you can walk in, you'll be fine. But like if you're starting out, I personally would not have been able to start out. Like I'm glad that it happened when it happened. Even though it was a long journey, it happened at the right time. I got to work with Nina Demo. Like that was amazing, you know? Like, but I wouldn't have been able to handle that 5 years prior. I would pass out. I'm like, wait, what? You're gonna do what? Yeah.
I just wanted to interject about shadowing. I think that shadowing is a really, really important thing. And also, I've been working on TV shows, and every time I've talked to a director about shadowing, they love it. I don't know a director that I've spoken to who is anti-shadowing, who doesn't want like an anti-shadow person. They all want to really surround themselves, because really the greatest creators are the people who do generously share, because there's a lack of ego, and that's what is the singular. It's open, it's free, it's remissive ego. Not all the time. Sometimes it's created sort of like as a, you know, a weird coincidence, but shadowing is a really important thing, and every single person, director that has had somebody shadow, they love it. They are a free vessel, and I would really encourage that. I love shadowing. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, and that's, you know, that's what Stage 32's mission is, to educate, and, you know, it's really to give back, and you know, the point of these questions was, you know, obviously it does take a long time, and, you know, you do have to put your views in, and once you gain your champions, you know, and the people that will really go to bat for you, that's really when you can take your short and be able to, you know, serve that as your calling card for the next step, and serve that as your proof of concept if you want to go into features. I still had so many questions for you, but the time has gone by so fast, and you have a premiere that you're premiering your film.
2:30. I hope you guys can see it.
So I want to get to some questions from the audience. I have probably about 15-20 minutes, so we'll have to keep our answers short, you guys. Let's start all the way in the back. How about you standing in back?
Me? Okay, cool. So my name's Drew. I'm a writer, director, editor. I have a short film that's screening next Wednesday in the web series block.
Congrats.
Thank you. My question is this: I've directed 8 shorts now, and I'm curious as to what you guys think is the point at which you feel like you've done enough short films and you're ready for like a feature or for TV.
I feel that every day.
Yeah.
No, like seriously. I mean that sincerely. That I don't think there's ever a moment in one's career where you arrive. I know that sounds strange, because it's like, I think for many people it's like, oh, there are plenty of people that are established and they arrive and all these things. But I think that you're always learning something new. There's always a new challenge. That's why I made my first feature film. I thought I was hot shit. I was like, I just did my feature film, I'm going to do whatever I want. And that's really not true. You know, you make your first big project, and then you find out there's another mountain on the other side that you have to figure out. And there's always another mountain that you have to climb. And so I don't think there is ever this moment where it's like, I've done enough, because every film and every project you do is its own unique challenge. And so it's about being open enough with your work to say, these are the things I know how to do, these are the things I don't know how to do, and these are the people I need to surround myself with to compensate. You're always learning.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for Rachel. Since you have such great TV experience, I was wondering if you've ever pitched a series with a short film as a proof of concept? And if so, do you have any advice or what do you need to be prepared to bring in the room with you? Like, do you suggest a lookbook? I mean, besides the actual short itself, what else?
It's a great question. I've actually had a lot of interest in Rosita Lopez as a TV series. And what it's been is like they've seen the short and they're like, we really like this, can you develop it into a television series? And I just haven't had time. If I were to actually sit down and do it, then yeah, it's figuring out the characters. The biggest thing is, can this last for 5 seasons? So you got to figure out like what are the legs of the show. If it's something that like has cliffhangers or whatever, what are the season arcs that can last for 5 seasons? That's really, really important. And then creating a world. If you create a world that's really interesting and characters that are really interesting, and it doesn't have to be long. I mean, I have friends who sold stuff on like a 3-page pitch document. But it's like, who are the main characters? What are some of the sample episodes? What's the pilot look like? And the most important thing is, how does this last for 5 seasons? If we're going to invest all this money, we want to know what has lasts. But I just haven't had time to do that work. But people have been interested. We've actually thought about making Neighbors as a television show too, but I just haven't had time.
And we actually just did a great webinar on Stage 32 that gives like specific examples of lookbooks and all the different pitch documents, and it was taught by a 20-year television veteran, so make sure you check out the webinars. All right, how about over here, you behind the left?
I have a question for you, going to this idea of proof of concept and the key word of proof being in that. I imagine that there's a kind of a parallel thing happening, that you're not only proving your material and proving what you're presenting, but you're proving yourself as well. You're all individual, and you're all artists who ideally know your own voice and know what you have to say, have to give. But I imagine there are also my question is that I wonder if you've had the experience, or I'm almost sure you have, and I'd be curious to know how you've dealt with the experience of pitching to people, whether they be executives or management or anything, who are coming from a perspective or a paradigm of known material or known quantities, known talents out there, and they want to identify and find out who you are in relation to that. Are you another X? Are you another Y? Are you another Z? Is your material, is that similar to this? When you run into that, how do you address a question like that? Do you try to disassociate from these known successful quantities? Do you try to establish yourself? Or do you say, well, it's this, but there was this whole thing, well, it's this plus this, it's this plus, which I think dilutes originality. I'm curious to know how you have addressed this type of question.
No, I've never had that question. But I think that there's nothing intrinsically wrong with being compared. I think that everybody gets compared in their lives for a lot of different reasons. Because I mean, you're talking about pitching executives or investors or studios, whatever it is. They need to be able to wrap their head around who you are, and your work is all of our work. I don't think anyone works in film and their work is not inspired by someone else's, right? That's just the nature of the business. You grew up watching something that you just loved, and that film just kind of inspired who you want to be, right? And so we all have inspirations, but the key is that once you can say, this is my comp, this is who I aspire to be, what is it that's different about the voice that I have that diverges from where I first learned that voice, right? And so for me, it's about figuring out to say that, Sidney Lumet, for example, is someone that I idolize. And so what is it that he did that I love, and how can I use my own experiences to spin off of that to create my own voice? I think if someone can wrap their head around that, and then you can quantify what it is that you want to do in that comp, then they can figure out who you are.
I also think it's a really good question, because it comes down to that idea of business. You do have to brand yourself. Every single meeting, people are like, they're essentially asking me, how do I brand myself? And James did really well when he was like, I do stories about loss and identity. Well, that can I can't do the word I'm looking for, but it can expand across many, many genres.
All of them.
Yeah, so, for me, it's kind of a broad answer, but I usually say I'm drawn to things that are really character-driven, that are super visual. And so, that allows it to translate across. But, my work's political. It's not always overtly political, but it's political. And I think the work that I'm getting even in TV is because they see the type of artist that I am. AHS was about female power, and it was about toppling the patriarchy. Like, it's not a surprise I got that episode. My episode of MAYANS is very female power, and it's kick-ass, and it's political, and I'm not surprised I got that episode. There's a show that I'm about to get where the showrunner was like, I want Rachel to have episode 5, and we didn't really work with my schedule, and they're like, no, episode 5 is the only episode we want Rachel to direct, because it's the right episode for her. So I do think it's really important to brand yourself without limiting yourself. It's such a tricky thing, but it's a good question because it comes down to like that business, and that like, you're a product that you're selling. So, yeah.
No, I mean, I don't really have a conclusion. I would echo that completely. I think if you brand yourself at the start, or you have an idea about the branding has such an interesting connotation, doesn't it, an association. But the honest thing is that you are really creating or creating a maximum of your intent, whatever the voice of your artist is. And I really echo what Rachel said and James said is about it really is short, pithy, really entry into talking to people, but it really starkly sets out who you are, and it can also open up the door for having a more pithy conversation. Because really, and this stems back to being an actor and a director, I've been in rooms where you basically say, you have to know to what degree of positivity the person is in, and he's like, hey mate, we're going to have a conversation for 30 minutes or an hour at a coffee shop, or we're going to be in a board meeting, and you're going to have that board meeting vibe. And really knowing where you are, because you don't really want to sell yourself or your ideas short, but knowing where you are allows yourself, and that's why branding really allows yourself to create a pithy association of whatever that true depth is that you're trying to create. That's what I found to say.
Right, we have time for probably one or two more. How about you, sir? Right there.
Yeah, going back to the killing your darlings conversation, how do you navigate a situation where an investor or executive is hoping to change content in regards to knowing when is this a give them an inch, they're taking a mile situation, or maybe I should collaborate because their ideas are legit?
This is a very good question. I had a very strong difference of opinion with the producer on a project a few years ago. We did not have a happy marriage. That was a very informative experience for me to say that you really need to be upfront about what your intentions are at the beginning. I don't think people are mysterious about what they think about the project that you're making is. Like when they read it or if they talk about what it's going to be, people don't suddenly decide they want to start changing it halfway through most of the time. Usually that's something that you can have conversations about extensively up front. My perspective on this is you need to know who you're marrying. You need to know if you're in television, who your showrunner is, if you're in film, who your financier studio is. Understand what it is that they want out of the project. And if you and they do not share that definition, you might want to reconsider choosing to do that thing with that person.
Yeah, I heard a woman speak one time, and it's just really sort of stayed with me, where she's like, if you go into a room and you pitch and they don't respond, just say thank you because they're not good people. Yeah. And I think it's
Don't waste
the
your
same.
time.
Yeah, I think
And
it's the
You
same.
can't convince people with a lot of the time, because you're going to come against that beast with the financing, the whole business of it, but really, the creative aspect is so important. And whatever degree you are, if you don't have that true relationship, or if they're not speaking honestly to you, then they go, yeah, we get it, you get it, and they just don't get it, what you're doing.
Run away.
Imagine doing 3 years, doing,
I'll tell another crazy story. Again, early on in my career, I had written a screenplay that a producer was really into and he was going to make. And he started rewriting it, and it was like straight up porn. And I was like, oh wow, oh, okay. And I was still going to do it because I really wanted to make my movie. And the actress came to me and she was like, I already signed, and this guy is so pervy, and I am begging you because you haven't signed, please don't sign and kill this. And I was like, okay. And I did, and it would have been really bad. It would have been really bad. But it's like, if you if you're working with people that you really trust and you really respect and they're giving you feedback, that's gonna land differently. So you just have to find your people so that you know that, like, when they give you feedback, like, oh, like, you know, like Jonathan that I was talking about with my co-writer. If he gives me feedback, I hear it because we think the same and he's probably right. And if we don't agree, we talk it out until we find the solution.
My final thought on that is that the no's you say in your career may be more important than the yeses. Always. Be picky about the things you choose to do. Don't do it just because you feel like you need to. Do the things that make sense and run after those things, because when you try to litter your career with things that don't make sense, you're going to find yourself in a quick detour to nowhere, because there is no vision and there is no voice. Do the things that make sense and say no to the people that don't get what you want to do. Woo!
One quick question for you guys. We haven't tackled this for the screenwriters that are in the audience. Would you recommend, if they have a feature script, that they take it upon themselves to either film a scene from their script or film their interpretation of the script in a short film? Do you think that is beneficial?
I've never seen it done, so I don't know if I have an answer for this. The only thing I would say is that if you're a writer that wants to, if you're not planning to direct it yourself, I guess I have a contrarian opinion about this. I think that you may end up being disappointed because the director may have a different idea on how to do that, and so I'm not sure if I would do it personally.
Oh, you're talking about as a separation from the screen, as in the writer taking it to a director.
It's an interesting question. I don't know if I would do it, but that's just me. They might well disagree with me on this.
Well, I mean, but you're at
the juncture of the relationship, I think, formed, I suppose. In a way, it circles back to the last question, which is, like, how do you work out what the relationship wants to be? Because you're creating the art, IP, whatever it is, and you're taking it to somebody else. So in a way, I mean, I've heard of that being done. I actually have heard of that.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious about that because it's coming up and it's very controversial from what we're seeing. Yeah.
And I'm not saying
it's also easy to do it as well. It's easy to do it, and as James said before, it's easy to say no, you don't want to work with the other person. But to see an interpretation about, I mean, I think I'm understanding the question right. Seeing an interpretation of that person's work. It must be yours.
And my answer to that is not to say that I don't like collaborating. I love collaborating, but I'm just saying that, like, I wonder, what that would do to your relationship. I don't know the answer to that, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think as a director, if a screenwriter had shot a scene, I would automatically feel like you want to direct this.
Yeah,
and I'd be like, you should direct this.
Right,
because that's what we do as directors, we bring it to life. So if you really are so specific on how you see it and what you want
Just
to
go do it.
then just do it.
Totally get it. All right, we have time for one more question. Quick answers because you're going to have to get to your screening, and we still have to. You guys still have to choose. You guys have to choose the winner too to give away the book. So, all right, who wants this last question bad enough? All right, I'll let you guys choose. There's two hands up, left or right. Left or right. Left or right. Which side?
Meaning my emo.
Okay. All right. So it's interesting. We have an interesting mix up there. I'm going to try to be super quick. You have someone without representation. You have an actor, and then a director that is working a lot. So when you're bridging the gap between shorts and features, when you're pitching to financiers, it's often like, okay, who's attached? When you are for me to get the money, I need to be able to know who's attached. To go to the actor that is like above your level to make it viable, you have to be like put an offer in. So who do you lie to? Do you lie to anyone? and also, it is a catch-22 that everyone goes through. I've gone through it like 5 times. I've turned down managers, and they're like, have your people talk to my people as well. Which, before you even get to the offer stage, they're like, well, have your people talk. It's like, I'm talking to you right now. So it's like, how do you navigate that? And then as an actor, do you want good material, or do you rely on your people to find it for you?
The only one's crap. That's all.
I know, no, I go to the doctor. No, you know, meaning like,
okay.
If it came to you outside.
So quick answer. Who do you lie to? Who you're honest with? Lie to the agent, be honest with the manager, and build a good relationship with the actor. Overstate what you can do as long as you can back it up because you're trying to sell them. There's nothing wrong with overstating as long as you can deliver by the time that it's time for you to do that. Because you have to have a little bit of bravado to be confident enough to go after someone that's more experienced than you are. You've got to make yourself be confident in general. And you have to know you know how to do it. And so like if you actually know what you want to do with this project, it doesn't matter how big or tall the actor is, whatever it is, you know what you want to do, and so then you convey that. And if people believe that, you do it.
Right.
Can I ask you what your question was with regards to the actor?
When an actor's being approached, so like to get to an actor that can help viability for your project, and you've only done shorts, and your script is really good, you believe in it, oh, at least you think so, you've been told so. Getting that to the actor sometimes involves like your manager or your agent reaching out to their agent. If you don't have representation yet, and you're like, I'm doing this thing.
I'll tell you something interesting.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
this is my perspective as an actor. I tell my team, I want to see everything that has been offered to me, so that people are writing, because then I have the ability to make a decision. You always want to, and I know a lot of actors who are there as well. There might be some who aren't, so I'm not representing everybody across the board. But my team, the people that represent me, know that I want to see everything that somebody else has made an effort to come to me with, to see me in a certain light, because it doesn't matter if it's just 1 out of 100. If their brazenness, their boldness translates to the greatness in creativity, you know what I mean? If there's a parallel, you don't want to miss out by saying, hey, listen, I didn't accept the email because I told you to look out for me. So I would advocate just getting out there, send it to ICM, WME, whoever the hell you're represented by, right? Whoever you like. Be bold.
What do you have to lose? I mean, at the end of the day, you send it to somebody, they like it, they don't like it. You have nothing to lose by sending. I learned that lesson in my town, 123 people, and 16. You have nothing to lose by firing off a letter to any agency, because the worst they can do is tell you no.
Because also good actors want to work with great stories, great creators, and they really do.
I would also say managers are easier than agents. And if you write a personal letter as to like why this actor is the perfect person for this role, and like just make it super specific, that helps. Casting directors help if you make friends with casting directors because they do have those relationships.
Right, love
So yeah.
People respond to love letters. Every casting director I know tells me write love letters, and that really can help.
Well, thank you so much.
Again, kind of random, we have an awesome webinar about this with like specific offers and everything, and even the approach to agencies who take unsolicited things from people who aren't represented. So check that out. All right, so we're down to the final. You guys have to decide who asked the best question. That
This is
copy of the press source filmmakers. American Idol.
There was one woman who asked the question, so I'm giving it to you.
And Arby's in the back and we'll sign it for you, so make sure you find them at the end.
Thanks for listening to us blab again.
All right, you guys.